We're investigating corruption. We're not investigating campaigns. I don't care about his campaign. I don't care about politics. But I do care about corruption. And this whole thing is about corruption.
Those pressers are fascinating. Well, President Trump defending his calls for Ukraine and now China to investigate 2020 hopeful and former Vice President Joe Biden. This as the president is expected to send a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, daring her, essentially, to impeach him. Trump maintains he's done nothing wrong. He tweeted out, quote, "As the president of the United States, I have an absolute right, perhaps even a duty, to investigate or have investigated corruption, and that would include asking or suggesting other countries to help out," end quote. Here now is former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew McCarthy. So, Andy, it might not be suitable, but is it legal for the president to do what he suggested?
Well, it's certainly legal for him to say that he thinks the Chinese should investigate Biden. I kind of think it's like when I was the U.S. attorney asking the Gambino family to investigate someone. I mean, you know, if he wants to find corruption, if that's what he's interested in, maybe he wants to start with China rather than Biden. But that's just my suggestion.
Andy, Jackie DeAngelis here. A lot of people are confused about the issue when it comes to impeachment specifically and the legality of it. So just to draw on David's question, there are two schools of thought out there. There are literally some people who are saying just asking the question of a foreign government is not legal. And then there are those who say there must be a quid pro quo to establish that it's not legal. So which one is it?
Yeah, Jackie, you know, quid pro quo is one of the worst terms that pervades this debate because all negotiations, quid pro quo is just Latin for this, for that. It's all foreign relations are exchanged between countries pursuing their own interests. The question in a bribery type case or a corruption case is always whether it's a corrupt quid pro quo or not. And the answer kind of depends on the situations. But with a lot of countries, I don't think this is the case with China. But for example, with Ukraine, we've had a mutual legal assistance treaty going back to 1998. When I was a prosecutor, before I was a prosecutor, since I was a prosecutor, it's a commonplace for governments to ask each other for assistance in their investigations. That's a pretty routine thing. In a lot of cases that are notorious cases, I remember in the 90s, for example, the FBI and the Justice Department asked President Clinton to lean on the Saudis to help us investigate the Khobar Towers investigation because of the Iranian involvement in it. So that sort of stuff goes on all the time. But I do think, you know, there's the law and there's the politics. And I think here, the reason this hits a lot of people the wrong way, and I probably shouldn't be trite about it, but, you know, as between China and Biden, Biden's not the problem. And, you know, none of you who know me will be surprised to learn that I'm not a Biden guy. But, you know, I think you need to, like, get a perspective on the players that we're dealing with here.
You know, Andrew, I look at things very simply. I'm not a lawyer, but I look at the president's interest in getting to the bottom of corruption or whatever. Would he have felt that way if Joe Biden wasn't the front runner for the Democratic nomination or on polls the biggest threat to him? So he was saying that he would be following us one way or the other. I find that really stretches credulity here. Now, I know this is going to be trouble with a lot of people, but there is a line about what's a high crime and a misdemeanor. That's a serious moral, ethical line to me. I mean, you know this is a guy you could likely face in the next election, and you are trying to get information on him that could be damaging to him in that next election. I don't know what the standards are to get someone, you know, impeached. I just know by the standard we should hold our presidents accountable, I think human beings accountable. That's just, for want of a better term, icky.
Icky, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Icky now, Neil, I don't think rises to the level
it's a legal term.
Of high crimes and misdemeanors. Well, you need like a Latin thing on the end of it. I would get it. But I, you know, I do think there's a lot to what you're saying in that, you know, it was just a week ago that the president gave his speech on nationalism at the United Nations. And his approach to foreign policy in general seems to be that the United States should butt out unless there is some critical American interest that's at stake. We should stay out of the affairs of other countries. It's hard to believe that having staked out that position, the president has decided that except he's going to be the scourge of corruption. That just doesn't, you know, with all the things that we've looked the other way at, including, for example, the short-range missile testing by the North Koreans fairly recently. I kind of don't think that, you know, corruption in Ukraine is the place that you want to make the exception. So I think he's vulnerable to the argument that he's doing this for political purposes.
Adam, real quick last question, because we only get about 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Well, okay, I'll go straight to the question I've been dying to ask a lawyer like you, Andy. Does the President of the United States have an absolute right to anything?
Yeah, in our system, we don't do absolute rights. There are no absolute rights. Even our right to liberty is an absolute, right? So, no, the president has carefully calibrated constitutional rights, and some of them are very powerful, but none of them is absolute.
Andrew McCarthy, what a pleasure always to have you here. Please come back and see us again soon.